Hello! Welcome to part 5 of Shin Godzilla, A Fractured Diamond, the last in this, little series. We'll be looking at the themes of the film, which have been mentioned a few times so far in these videos, and we'll be making a conclusion as to the quality of Shin Godzilla and its worth. Without further ado, let's get started. This is just my theory, based on meta-knowledge that might not even be relevant to the film or its development. What is undeniable, though, is the effect the themes have had on Shin Godzilla. The old world versus the new. Outdated principles against fresh ideas. Mistakes of the past, and the plans of the future. I have spoken a lot about the themes of Shin Godzilla throughout this video, and it's easy to see why. They are very, very strong, and affect pretty much everything we see in the film, from Godzilla himself to a bowl of noodles on a desk. The themes are the driving force of the film, and, as already mentioned, are inspired by real-world events, just like the original Godzilla. The experiences of the nuclear bombs and fears over future attacks are updated to experiences of nuclear and natural disasters and fears of future calamities. Godzilla the monster embodies the then recent disasters of 2011. From his second form's incursion onto land depicting the tsunami, even down to the destruction left in its wake, to the fourth form's unfathomable, indomitable advance, terrifyingly translating the events and effects of the nuclear power plant meltdown. Even his mutations are a grotesque metaphor for the 2011 disaster's changing nature. Not to be left out, the human cast arguably provide the most damning critique of the real-world events, with prominent figures failing to muster a proper, effective response to the growing threat before them. The film offers its own alternatives to the real-world errors, exchanging bureaucracy for collaboration and numerous delayed discussions for affirmative actions. It also hints at the old relationship between Japan and America and how that too needs to change, from tributary to collaboratory. These clashing aspects are embodied in the old government and the nerd crew, who in turn are represented by the Prime Minister and Rando Yagachi. The themes also work hand in hand with the story of Shin Godzilla to really get across what the film is trying to say effectively and immersively. This mostly happens in the first and second parts of the film, which are heavily influenced by those real-world events. From the government being confused by the unfolding calamity, to concentrating on platitudes rather than actions, to being hesitant to react, to doing too little, too late. Even the city going up in flames is inspired by the horrors of war. Thematically noteworthy is the moment when young, focused and intelligent Yagachi goes ahead with the plan despite the high radiation levels, leading to the plan's success, which can be directly contrasted to the old, misguided and confused Prime Minister sparing Godzilla earlier in the film, leading to destruction and death. Again, the themes are strong and permeate almost everything in the film. But not everything is sunshine and rainbows. Strong thematics are not inherently good, and they do not excuse any issues that might crop up. The least and possibly funniest of these is the exchange between Secret Chad Izumi and Old Soggy Noodles. I've mentioned before how this scene has strong thematic overtones, with its emphasis on making your own choices. However, when you get down to it, the exchange, and the choices therein, are laughably swift. Izumi says the plan is ready. Old Soggy Noodles replies, "But America though." Izumi counters, "But Japan though." And Old Soggy Noodles completely changes his mind. Like I said, laughably swift. Also, like I said, this is the least offensive of the issues. Godzilla, once a raging titan or charismatic champion, is left a soulless automaton in his own film. The human cast isn't far off being the same. In one case, almost literally. In another film, the ideas and ideals the themes offer would be represented by a strongly characterized Prime Minister and a more characterized Yagachi butting heads over the course of events. Unfortunately, interesting personalities are sacrificed on the altar of themes and are instead spread out amongst a multitude of faces. Single characters act as little more than figureheads for masses, like some mutant thing, or a mythical dragon. It is little wonder then that Kyoko gets the most character, since she is mostly divorced from the overall themes of the Japanese disaster and government handling thereof. Suddenly I want Toho to take a card out of Disney's deck and give us Kyoko, a Godzilla story. Speaking of, the totally made up parts of the film, specifically the nerd crew and the plan, go downhill thanks to the thematics driving the third act directly into the ground. Action after discovery after decision after theory, things just work out for the determined heroes up to and including stopping Godzilla. This all happens not because their story is mechanically sound, but because the film needs the nerd crew and the plan to be seen as the correct way of doing things in contrast to the government strategies, despite real-world events concluding otherwise.
A meltdown.
This goes doubly so for the comparison between Yagachi and the Prime Minister. The film makes it very clear who it deems made the correct choice between the two, via consequences, or lack of them. The situation the themes bring before the Prime Minister was ludicrous enough to begin with, but how they made him deal with it was worse. The Prime Minister, because of his focus on human lives at the expense of the task at hand, got to watch more buildings get trampled, soldiers be put in danger, the city be put to flame, and, finally, get himself killed. Yagachi, because of his focus on the job at hand, at the expense of human lives, got to become a hero with no negative consequences? The film does this, and other things, even if it needs to twist the fabric of reality and the very concept of cause and effect to do so, all for the sake of sticking to its themes. The twisting of reality causes another problem with the story that, initially, seemed like an improvement for the film series. How the original Godzilla came to be was left up in the air somewhat, giving future films a bit of leeway in adding to his story. Similarly, Godzilla was given new abilities over the years thanks to the more than casual nod the films gave to scientific accuracy. At a glance, Shin Godzilla takes its science far more seriously, giving Godzilla an origin based somewhat in scientific understandings and going to great lengths to explain many of Godzilla's attributes, although I'm pretty sure there's some translation issues going on. From diagnosing energy intake, to mixotrophic molecular structures, to regenerative asexual reproduction, Shin Godzilla does its best to bring itself up to date with modern science. But, with the themes overruling all else, the scientific method goes to pot. This in turn messes up the plot, leading to theories, conclusions, and outcomes that are either highly unlikely, unthinkable, or plain wrong. Or, in the case of the Maki riddle, completely irrelevant. Professor Goro Maki, on the face of it, has very little effect on the events of Shin Godzilla. His disappearance brings Kyoko chasing after him, so props to him on that. And his riddle achieved nothing beyond stalling the nerd crew and bringing the execution of the plan closer to the deadline of the nuke. Looking a bit deeper though, Maki may have merged with the soon-to-be Godzilla, making him an irrevocable part of the monster. His flowchart was left behind to let those smart enough to decipher it know how his theoretical monster might work, giving them a clue as to how to stop it, if they so choose. All of this could be interpreted as a metaphor for a long-predicted inevitable disaster and the knowledge to prepare for it. The slogan, "Now do as you please," could refer to the responsibility of those with this knowledge to act upon it. This in turn could refer to real-world analogues. Or at least I think that's what this is meant to mean. Unfortunately, once you know Shin Godzilla is heavily thematic, it becomes harder and harder to work out why things are the way they are, or if there is some deeper meaning to them. Take the name of the plan.
Yashiori, after the legendary sake that felled a Hydra.
I tried to work out if this was another theme. Yamata no Orochi is on my list of myths and legends inspired by the Chaos Camp, if you remember that from my Killing the Monsters of Great Joy video. From there, I started drawing lines. Was the multi-headed Hydra a metaphor for Western influences, its eating of the family's children representative of the tributary state of Japan to these foreign powers? But the more I tried to connect the dots, the more they just weren't connecting. And then I realised there probably wasn't anything to the name beyond a reference. With this mentality in mind, we can look back on Goro Maki and his riddle. His possible inclusion in Godzilla's genetic makeup might be a reference, but it doesn't really add anything to the plot, because Godzilla never acts out in a way that suggests Maki is a part of him. Similarly, Maki's riddle being a metaphor for the foreknowledge of disasters and how to use it doesn't really work when the nerd crew came up with their own plan in spite of it. Even Maki's phrase feels tacked on sometimes.
Why let other nations blow our country up when we could save it?
Perhaps it's time that Japan did as it pleased.
This leaves Maki as a character and everything to do with him feeling redundant and a waste of screen time which could have been better spent on something else, like character work. Finding out there was a theme behind an issue with the film only informs the reasoning behind the issue's existence. It doesn't get rid of the issue. Shin Godzilla is a perfect example of how themes can make and break a film. Shin Godzilla is great at making allegories to real events and transposing them into a completely different yet familiar story. But when trying to create whole new events to slot its themes into, it stumbles and falls, at best creating laughable moments, and at worst creating nonsense that shouldn't achieve what it achieves. And yet, without these themes, without these messages that it wanted to deliver, we wouldn't have a reimagined Godzilla. We wouldn't have a monster of our time. Shin Godzilla is a slave to its own themes, for good and for ill. When I started my analysis, it was my intention to make yet another Great Joy video to sit alongside Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Shin Godzilla had got a lot of praise over the years, and I wanted to share that praise, to shine a light on this cinematic diamond in all its glory. But the more I looked into the scenes, the more I examined all the little details, the more I shone a light into all of the nooks and crannies, the more cracks I found. Before I knew it, I was staring at a massive fracture that ran the length of what was supposed to be a flawless gem. This led to a question. Where does Shin Godzilla sit on the scale between Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong? Shin Godzilla has a lot of problems. A characterless, goalless Godzilla. Shallow human characters, most of them anyway. Science that is either confused or deliberately broken. Jarring editing. Incredibly unlikely events that exist purely for the plot to happen. A final battle that breaks reality. Budgetary limitations that have unfortunate effects throughout. And a story made lame by themes. At the same time, there is a lot to like. Godzilla's design and inspiration. Kyoko's character. Editing that produces action out of bureaucracy. Strong themes. And once again, having a Godzilla film that has bold, understandable and relatable socio-political commentary for our time. As a wise man once said,
"The good act does not wash out the bad, nor a bad the good."
I think the best way I can describe my feelings regards Shin Godzilla is by describing my reactions to the sound effects. American Godzilla films and TV shows used their own audio, even going as far as to mix their own Godzilla roars. Shin Godzilla, already making plenty of references as is, reuses the almost traditional sound effects used throughout the Godzilla franchise. Initially, hearing these sound effects from Godzilla films of yore plucked on my nostalgic heartstrings. These sounds matched up with the old roars and the evolving breath attack, well, actually evolving Yagachi. I found myself wrapped up rather comfortably in them. But after a while of noticing these sounds throughout the film, they began to draw my attention and break my immersion. Worse, during my analysis, I thought they might be a sign of recycling due to a lack of budget. Then after re-watching the film several times, I realised these old sounds had grown on me, or grown back onto me after so many years. This is the effect that Shin Godzilla as a whole has on me. At first I liked the film outright, even after noticing a few niggles here and there. After my analysis, I came to dislike the film immensely for how much it was messing up. With my realization that the film was chock full of themes and meaningful messages, I started to like the film again. Only to conclude that said themes and messages didn't suddenly stop the problems with the film from being problems. But then on that fateful rewatch, I realized I was enjoying the film again, despite knowing how bad it was. Shin Godzilla is, put simply, a seesaw of emotions. This is very different compared to the other two Godzilla films I've analysed in depth. When I watched Godzilla King of the Monsters for the first time, I liked it, even with the few problems I saw it had. Since then, every time I watched and analysed Godzilla King of the Monsters, I found something else to enjoy about it, and my appreciation has only grown. By contrast, Godzilla vs. Kong made me sad, and every time I watched and analysed it thereafter, something else would jump out at me to make me dislike it even more. So, again, where does Shin Godzilla sit? I'm inclined to put it closer to Godzilla vs. Kong than Godzilla King of the Monsters. It does some things good, but it also does a lot of things bad. And for now I'm inclined to say they outweigh the good by some margin. But for all its flaws, the film took the Godzilla franchise, something that had long fallen into a parody of itself, and attempted to bring it back up to a higher standard. Just like the monster himself, Shin Godzilla is part of the culture now, and at the very least, it's going to be a film to look back on and build off of. That's why I think this film is a fractured diamond, and not a broken one. And with that, I think I'll leave this video where Shin Godzilla should have left itself. I hope this video was informative, entertaining, or both. I hope it enlightened and helped you, dear viewer, to think more critically about the media you consume. Don't follow the trends just for the hell of it, but don't be contrarian for the lulz either. Look closer, take notes, and come up with your own opinions. I'll be more than happy to hear yours in the comments. Feel free to share this video around and get people talking. And if you fancy it, I have another Lon Boy on my channel. Last but not least, thank you for watching.
One simple question. What's this thing's energy source?
Maybe the answer. Is nuclear fit?
What'd you bring me?
Thank you for watching this video. If you've followed along with the series, I hope you found this to be a suitable end to it. Soon the full video will be released where you'll be able to experience the entire examination in one uninterrupted viewing. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you know when that comes out. If you have thoughts on my conclusions or anything else for that matter, leave us a comment. Whilst you're at it, feel free to like, share, and visit my Etsy store and Patreon links in the description. Last but not least, thank you for watching.